As a sliver of cold moonlight in a 26 AD Capri midnight slanted across the polished marble cloisters of the clifftop villa, the air was steeped in the faint scent of sea salt and the fragrance of laurel trees soaked in night dew. Within an inner chamber shrouded by heavy velvet curtains, where the distant murmur of the Mediterranean waves striking the reefs could be heard, a man with silvered hair and eyes reflecting a profound sense of universal desolation sat quietly, opening his empty hands. He was not awaiting urgent memorials from the Roman Senate. Instead, within the sanctuary of his mind, he chewed over the Stoic metaphor that the world is but a phantom illusion. He was Tiberius, the second emperor of Rome, a man who chose to flee at the summit of power, exiling himself to a lonely island for 11 long years. This is a chronicle of how restraint bursts with power, and how solitude is transmutated into nobility. The genesis of Tiberius's life held none of the typical royal heir's smoothness. Instead, it was a deep gray foundation woven from his mother Livia's relentless ambition and Augustus's palpable coldness amidst the smoldering embers of Rome's civil wars. As a youth born with an almost pathological craving for absolute sincerity, he inherited a microcosm ruled by the cold precision of lineage and the calculated stakes of political marriage. He eschewed the shallow, performative oratory of the public fora, turning instead to the smoke-filled embrace of military camps where he could measure the breadth of the earth through duty. This pursuit of responsibility and order became the first incurable fold in his psyche. He understood that true prosperity was not reclaimed through charitable grants, but through a sacred logic grown naturally from an ultimate respect for natural law and the weight of one's office. If his early military career was the honing of the soul, then the initial phase of his reign, known as the Blade of Restraint, was the practical crucible that pushed Tiberius's aesthetics of moderation to its absolute zenith. He overthrew all the fashionable hypocrisies of his time, decisively cutting the budgets for public festivals to the bone. He sought to replace the endless slaughter of entertainment with a long-term vision of fiscal prudence. In those quiet nights where only the sound of marble being chiseled could be heard, he issued silent commands that stabilized the Mediterranean through the ruthlessly precise calculation of imperial maps and provincial taxes. In that moment, Tiberius was the most solitary and steady artisan of the ancient world, accepting every malicious taunt with silence. This radical focus rendered him like a marble bell tower, solitary yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is often manifested as the fragmentation of emotion. When his adopted son Germanicus passed away in the east, Tiberius felt for the first time the chilling void of being abandoned by the gods. He discovered that the harder he strove to maintain the balance of power, the clearer that hidden sense of emptiness in his soul became. He wrote to a friend, "I used to think I was building the future, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of memory, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity, born of seeing through the rise and fall of material desire, became the hardest armor of his twilight years, allowing him to face the betrayal of his Praetorian prefect, Sejanus, with the serenity of a sunset sinking into the sea. The final season of Tiberius was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage on the island of Capri. In the early spring of 37 AD, the fine rain on the lonely island fell soundlessly. By then, his body had become remarkably light from chronic exhaustion. In his final conscious moments, he refused all suggestions to return to Rome for grand ceremonies. Instead, he requested his servants carry him to the window to listen one last time to the tides of his own heart, performed for no audience. He closed his eyes and, with those hands that had traced 10,000 star charts, traced a final arc of closure upon his knees. The evening breeze carried away the great hermit's last sigh, marking the formal end of an era of classical order. Even today, 2,000 years after his passing, the name of Tiberius remains the sole sanctuary for many a restless seeker in the dead of night. What he left behind was not a triumphal column piercing the heavens, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and the noble exit. He teaches us that even if the entire world besieges you with turmoil, even if your era is destined to collapse, the order within your heart is governed solely by your own perception of truth. He maintained absolute lucidity amidst absolute shadows. Beneath the ruins of Capri, their edges now smoothed by history, he remains in a posture of eternal listening, seemingly still soothing this increasingly anxious world. The saga of Tiberius thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading murmur of the waves at Capri. He was never an opportunist who bartered his power for fame. He was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. He reminds us that no matter how mundane or fragmented your life may be, inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Perhaps you, too, are currently adrift in some uncertainty of life. But believe that every life has its own Capri, a private space for dialogue with the self that requires no outward explanation. May the serenity of Tiberius become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful and expansive shore of the inner soul. Good night, and may your dreams be fair.